Hello again. I'm sure that we all remember the wave of violence and disorder which swept the United States and Britain following the death of George Floyd last year. The aftershocks of the affair have not died down yet. Indeed, the effects of this black man's death following his arrest seem to be growing stronger every day. The renaming of street names and even museums in London are a direct consequence of Floyd's death. All the talk of decolonising everything from school textbooks to operas, public buildings and the curricula used at universities has all been precipitated, or at the very least received a huge boost from George Floyd's death. The Black Lives Matter movement and all the mischief which it has created also rides on the wave created by the arrest and death of George Floyd. I want to look today at an earlier and similar incident and ask why this one passed unremarked. It involved a man with psychiatric problems who had been taking illegal drugs and wound up in trouble at a shop and then was forcibly restrained by police officers, one of whom knelt on his neck and so inadvertently killed him. Sound familiar? The thumbnail to this video shows Tony Timpa, who in 2016 was schizophrenic and had been taking cocaine. The police in Dallas restrained him in the street and knelt on him, despite his crying out, "You're killing me." I give a link in the description to this video to footage of his death. In an interesting twist, Timpa was white, and one of the police officers who held him down until he died was black. What I find fascinating is that the death of a white man at the hands of police officers, one of whom was black, passed completely unremarked by the world. It was just one of those things. The truth is, we all know that police get a little rough sometimes, or perhaps over-enthusiastic about physical restraint during arrests. It happens. When it happens to white people, as it does quite regularly, nobody really bothers too much, and it's written off as just one of those unfortunate things which happen. When it happens to a black person, there are riots, and all our history books are suddenly being rewritten, and our museums revamped in case the content upsets black people. It was a movement which began after George Floyd's death which resulted in London's Jeffrey Museum being renamed to the Museum of the Home. It is the same movement which has led to university curricula being revised in line with the idea of decolonisation and 100 other things. All triggered by the death of one black man who had been taking illegal drugs and struggling violently with police officers trying to arrest him. Why did the death of Tony Timpa not spark any riots or demands to change the names of museums and pull down statues which have been there for hundreds of years or more? What was it about the death of a white man being restrained by a black police officer which did not strike the same chord which that of a black man being restrained by a white police officer did? We have seen the same kind of thing in Britain. White people die in police stations or during an arrest and nobody takes all that much notice. When black people are involved, riots tend to begin. One thinks of the riots which swept England in 2011, sparked off by the death of a black gangster in Tottenham. The serious rioting in 1985 was also associated with the same kind of thing. There was undoubtedly a time when white police officers in the United States and Britain behaved in a bad way towards black people, and one quite sees why this provoked protests. We remember the way that the police in the southern states of America in the 1950s and 1960s behaved when dealing with black protests and so on. Those days are gone. In both America and Britain, black police officers are as likely to be seen as white ones, especially in big cities. One sometimes gets the impression that when some incident involving the arrest of a black person goes wrong, that many people jump to the conclusion that things today are still a bit like they were in the film Heat of the Night, with all police officers being bigoted whites and all black people their helpless victims. If there were not violent protests every time something happened to a black person who comes into contact with the police, then before you know it, we would be back in the days of Jim Crow and the Ku Klux Klan. That's the impression one gets from the way that people react to the death of a black person as a result of a bungled arrest by the police. It really isn't like that in the 21st century. The effect of a single unfortunate event like the arrest of George Floyd have caused a lot of problems in Britain and need to be manipulated by people with their own agenda. We need to stop and ask ourselves why the death of a man like Tony Timpa was ignored by everybody, but George Floyd's death means that we in Britain have to start destroying our history.